Hi, it's actually Erev Shabbos, but I had my yahrtzeit for my mother yesterday, and so you had to see him. I tried to do it last night to put it online, but I was not successful. So I'll try again to share with you the Dvar Toah for those that are interested in it. If anybody is, this would be sort of the nature of a Hadran or Dvar Toah on the Maseches Krisus, because that's what I finished. Okay, so here we go. I wrote it down. Everyone knows that when you get to the Maseches Krisus, one of the big topics is Safek Doraisa. There is a very well-known disagreement between the Rambam and the Rashba whether the din of Safek Doraisa l'chumra is itself a Doraisa or the Rabbanan. That's very well known among the scholars that the Rambam holds that the rule that you and I always go by, Safek Doraisa l'chumra, is itself only the Rabbanan. That min ha-Torah, Safek Doraisa is also Safek Doraisa is also the kula. Midrabanan l'chumra. Why is this in the Gemara Krisus? Because half of the tractate is about Asham Tolui, and the Asham Tolui itself is a carbon that the Torah prescribes for Safek. That's what Asham Tolui is. Now, if the Torah prescribes a guilt offering for a Safek Aveira, so how can anyone maintain that Safek Daraisa is the Kulam in a Torah like the Rambam does? This is basically a kasha on the Rambam. In fact, it's the proof the Rashba has against the Rambam, because the Rashba, of course, says that Safek Daraisa is l'chumra min Torah. Now, a little bit of history. You know me. There's a long-standing argument regarding Girsas in the Lashon of the Rambam in Hilchos Tumas Meis, Perek Tes, Sif Yud. It's a very famous piece, or it will be in a second. And it says, this is the Rambam talking, Davar Yedua, Shekol Elu HaTumos, Ukayotzi Behen, Shem Safek, Hari Hechel Devrein. It's well known that anytime you have a tumas, Safek Tuma, or any of that other kind of Safek, they're also midrabanan, not midraisa. Ve'ein tami min haTorah el shmi shenit latumas vadai. That midraisa, it only has to be not a Safek, it has to be a tuma vadai. I will call it svekos, bein betumas, machalas asuras, arayas, shabbosas, ein lehem el midibur sofrim. But then the Rambam has a phrase which is controversial, whether it's accurate or not. V'yavo pikein davar shechayavin al zedon okoris sveko asim in Torah shari oso chayav asham toli. That if something is a big sin and has a chayav karis attached to it, that's a big sin. So then, indeed, you go l'chumra, because after all, the Torah does say you chayav asham toli. If you see here, it's like in parentheses, okay? Over here. It's in parentheses. And if you look inside the Frankel Rambam, which is supposed to be the best one in terms of Girsas and, at least Ashkenazim wise. So here's the Frankel Rambam, and they have this passage that I just read you, where the Rambam says Safek Daraisa is l'kula, except when there's a Safek Tuma, so to speak. And hold on one second here. Hold on one second. Close this down. Yeah, sorry about that. And the point is that if you look on the side, what they call the Kalufa Girsos, right? You know what I mean, right? The notes about the text. So you'll see that many famous people, the Marid and others, say that it's a mistake, that Chaim Belozhiner, that it shouldn't be there. It's that phrase that when it's a Chayav Karis, Safek a Chayav Karis, then you're Machmir, that's actually not really in part of the Rambam. So the Rambam is Mechalik, at least the way I just read you, between a regular Safek and a Davar Shechayav and Azdun Karis. That's what Asham Toli would be for Chayav Karis. So the Rambam's theory is nuanced. Some cases of doubt are min haTorah permitted, others are not. But check out the Kapach Rambam, or the Meduyik Yemenite ones. No, it's this one, which is supposed to be the most accurate, from Taimon and all that. And they claim, they have the oldest Girsas and whatever, and that's missing. Doesn't say anything there about if it's a chayiv kares, then you go safek deraisa lechumra. But rather, just blanket. If it's safek deraisa, it's lekula min Torah. If it's safek deraisa, and obviously if it's safek deraisa, the same thing. So what's going on over here? The Shinu Nischos, as I say, gives its whole, history to it. But if you hold that the passage is missing, as many do, I'll say it again, the whole history of that subject is right here, right? So how do you explain the Shitas and Rambam that on the one hand, Safek Deraisa is Lakula, and yet the Torah does mandate an Osham Toloi for cases of Safek? This is one of those classical questions on the Rambam. Okay. The answer the Rambam himself seems to give, different than the above-mentioned passage about the Chayiv Koris, is that Osham Toli is B'mocham Ikvei Surah. That is, in what kind of suffix does the Torah mandate an Osham Toli? Only in a case of Shtei Chatichos, Achas Shal Chela v'Achas Shal Shuman, not in the case of Chaticha Achas, Savik Chela v'Savik Shuman. It's got to be in a case where there's two pieces, and one piece, and it's known that one is treif and one is kosher, and the guy went ahead and ate one of them, but we don't know whether the one he ate was kosher or not. But we do know that one of the two was treif. That's what we call there was a kavias of the Isser, the presence, the undeniable presence of the Isser was there. So in that case, it's more strict, and in that case, Savik Daraisa would be l'chumra, because after all, that is the case when you bring an Osham Toli. Okay, so it's a different hesber that the Rambam himself is offering. Since the Isura is definitely present, the doubt is treated more strictly. The Rambam makes this distinction of Ikvi Surah explicitly in the Hilchos Shkagos, Perek Chesim and Beis, Sif Beis, where the Rambam says, Eino chayiv b'osham tolei ad sheyisham iser kavua. You're only chayiv in osham tolei if there's an iser kavua. You know for sure the iser was there. You just don't know whether you ate it. Ketzad, ochal chelev, v'safik im hay kazayis apokos min kazayis, o shahaya lefana. So in other words, there's no question the food was treif. The question is whether you ate the right amount to be chayiv something. O shahaya lefana chatichas chelev v'chatichas shuman v'achal achas man you do eiz man achal. Excuse me. Or if there were two pieces, one was chelev, one was treif, and one wasn't, and you ate one of them, but you don't know which one. Or any case where the Isser is definitely present. For example, Ishta Achoso Imba Babayis, Baal Achas Man Main Day Ezman Baal. He's not sure which one he had been with because it was dark and so forth. But the Usser woman was there in the house. Baal B'Shabbos. I'm sorry, Shabbos B'Chol. Also Malachos. B'Acham Yidua Bezim Yom also. Oshasa Malacha B'Shabbos Ezim Malacha. So all these cases, like, was it Shabbos when I did the malacha, or was it after Shabbos? It's not clear. But I know that Shabbos was there. It was a Saturday night, let's say, for example. So it's very, very possible that it could have been Shabbos. So that's Ikvi Surah. However, said maybe Osham Toli V'chein Kol Kiyotz Behen because it's Ikvi Surah. Avolim Hoysel Fon Chaticha Achas. Well, if you only ate one, Potter Shari Ein Kanis Kavua. So, and the Rambam goes on along these lines. So you have explicitly in the Rambam himself's explanation what Osham Toli is. Now, clearly, this Rambam is not going with the explanation of the other Rambam, the controversial Girsa. It's not simply a matter of Chayiv Koris, but rather a question of Ikvei Surah. The distinction of Ikvei Surah is derived from the Mishnah in Krisus. The Mishnah says, Safek achal chelev, Safek lo achal. It was a Safek whether or not he ate chelev. Maybe Osham Toli. That's what the Mishnah says. In the Gemara, there's a debate between two early Amorim and Bavel. Ravasi Amar Chaticha Acha Shaninu, Safek shel chelev, Safek shel shuman. Chibarav Amar Chaticha Mishtei Chaticha Shaninu. So one says that this statement that you bring an Osham Toli is when you have a single piece and you don't know what it is, and the other one says no. There were two pieces. One you know for sure was treif, but you don't know which one you ate. Later, and obviously, the second one, we had two pieces. That's called Ikvi Surah. Later, Amoraim, we're masber this machlokas in various ways. That's in the Gemara, in the middle of Krisus. Xeris HaKoshuv, Abshalavar, But the hezbollah that really took off is that of Rav Nachman, that this is debate whether or not you need Ikbi Surah, as we see from the Rambam. So as I said before, the one who says you need two pieces, says you're only going to be Chayav and Hashem Toloi, you're only going to be Machmir when there's the presence of something that was treif, you just don't know whether you had it. But not when there's not even the presence of something that for sure is treif. But what's the reasoning behind Ikbi Surah? Why only there does the Torah mandate an Hashem Toloi? This is not made clear in the Gemara, so there's a literature of speculation on this among the Rishonim and the Achronim, as you can see in the Mesifta and the Keshes, all those books. The simplest part to me is this: you knew that there was an Isser present because it's Shtei Chatichas. You knew there was a significant risk of sinning, and you went ahead and ate it anyway. Your conduct was criminal negligence. Hence, the Torah says you must apologize through an offering, acknowledging that your conduct was wrong. So in other words, it's a moral sin. Your attitude, that's what the problem was. This makes the most sense, at least to me. And the Gemara indeed says that the Hashem Toloi is to protect you from divine wrath due to your criminal negligence, your cavalier attitude towards Yisurim. That's the language of the Gemara. The Hashem Toloi is lahagin alav min ha-Yisurim, to protect him from the Yisurim, even though he didn't do anything wrong, for sure. In other words, he did do an act, and if you did an act of criminal negligence, you have to bring an Hashem Toloi. If subsequently it becomes clear that you committed an actual sin, that it wasn't just criminal negligence, that you ate a chaticha that may have been treif in a makom ekri surah. But if in the end it turns out you ascertain that the piece you ate was actually treif, then you have to bring another carbon, you have to bring a chatas, for a total of 2 karbonos. So the ikvi surah is what makes your act an act of criminal negligence, and not just a regular shogeg. On the other hand, if there's no ikvi surah, the Rambam says you're pater, as in the case of chaticha achas. But does pater mean mutter? In fact, is it okay to do it? Does Safek Daraisa l'kula min Torah mean that the Torah is just fine with you doing things that may be forbidden? So this is not vadai forbidden. Yes, indeed, says the Shev Shmatza. That's how the Torah is structured. Only vadai cases, not Safek cases. No, on the other hand, says the Shari Yosher, if I understand him correctly, what Rav Shimon is saying is that treif of food in a situation of Safek, although not forbidden, will be metamtim esalev if it turns out in point of actual fact that they were treif. You see? You know what I mean? You ate one of 2 pieces. We don't know what it was. So, you bring Hashem Toloi. But if you want to argue that, I don't know what I did wrong, and therefore the Torah allows me, according to the Rambam, to eat it, then I should say if it's halachically permitted me to eat, then it's not matamtim, it's like wrong. And the words of Rav Shimon Shkab, ein etzem ha'isr mishtane leheter aydi helam hayidiyah. The isr doesn't change to be mutter simply because the person doesn't know what he was eating. In other words, he wasn't aware that he was eating it. And Rav Shimon is even more emphatic a little bit later. It's on the Shari Yosher in the beginning, where Rav Shimon says, Kol hasfekos lo hutru al pi din Torah, rak shelo hizhira Torah. Isn't that interesting? It's not that the Torah says it's okay, it's just the Torah didn't legislate a punishment for it. But Safek Isser b'mkom ha'omei. So the thing that might be Isser, which you may or may have not, we'll never know, possibly, have eaten, b'mkom ha'omei. U'misha chas al nafsho, and if you're from and you're really worried about your soul, known as burning in Gehenna Vade Deroy Lapi Derech HaTorah Livrish Misafek Isser. Then the right way, the Derech HaTorah, is to be porish Misafek Isser. Even, in other words, if it's Chaticha Achas. So, he wants to say, it's a Chiddush, that even though the Rambam says Safek Deraisa is really Lakula Min HaTorah, I know it's not Midrabanan, I'm talking about Min HaTorah, so it's not that the Torah is saying Lakula and you can do it. The Torah is simply saying it's not actionable, but it's wrong. And if it turns out that what you ate, even one piece, was actually the treifa piece, you will be judged for it. And you won't be able to say, well, they told me it was okay because it was a Safek Deraisa, well, it wasn't a Surah. It's interesting, after I saw this in the Shari Yosher, to look at the language of the Rambam himself that I just read you. And the Rambam doesn't actually, it's interesting, like Rav Shimon, the Rambam doesn't actually say the words that this stuff is okay. He says, Kol hasfekos, ben betumas machal asuris ben barayis shavosas. All the sfekos, ein lam el midivri sofrim. Ein lam el midivri sofrim. All you have is drabonim. So it's not deraisa, but the Rambam doesn't say it's okay to do it. So it's a little bit interesting. But remember, others like the Shef Shemaites don't agree. The bottom line is that the Osham Toli is mandated specifically for criminal negligence, regardless of whether or not you actually committed the sin, regardless of whether or not you actually ate the treifa chatifa. Okay? If you want to go a little bit more nitty gritty, the Achronim debate whether your sin, right, which means, let's say you ate the treif stuff. You don't know about it, but God does. Right? There's no way to ascertain, but Hashem knows. So is that the sin of eating treif? Or is the sin a different one, called the sin of violating a suffix? In other words, violating the Torah law of doing something that may possibly or plausibly, if surah, be prohibited. That sin is its own sin. It's what they call an Isser Klali Al Kol HaSfekos. In the words of the Rogatchover, Sfeka Deraisa Eina Mishum Isser Atzmo El Din Mechudash. But I'm not going to go into that. For this reason, I couldn't understand the statement of Rameir in the Gemara in Yud where Rameir says, Hashochet Osham Toloi Bachutz, Rameir Mechayev V'Chacham Potrim. In other words, a guy shechted wrongly his Osham Toloi outside the Azara. Rameir says he did a sin, and he's chayav a carbon for it. According to Bein Gershom, he's chayav an Osham Toloi. According to the Raiva, he's chayav a chatas. Now Rashi explains Rameir as holding that the Torah requires an Osham Toloi even when there's no Ikbei Surah. That's the Shita Rameir. Even though the guy may in fact have not committed a sin, in fact, it's not likely he did so, even though the guy may have in fact not eaten the treifa meat, in which case the Osham Toli was being brought for no reason, and therefore the animal is really chulin, and therefore there was no sin in shechting outside the Azara. Nevertheless, Rameir holds that the guy is chayev because of the possibility that he may have in fact eaten chelev, and therefore sinned when he offered outside the temple courtyard. And as a consequence, he must now bring another expiatory carbon in the Azara. The point is, if you go like Rashi, in reality, if the guy in reality did not eat the chelev, if what he turns out, the chaticha yeh, turns out to be not chelev but shuman, kosher, the original Osham Toli was a mistake, and the animal was indeed chulin. That's what Rashi says. Here's the words of Rashi. Rameir Mechai Mishom Shlutei Chutz, Afal Pi Dikal Meimer, Shemalo Ochal Chelev, Ve'osham Zeh Chulin Hu. But I don't understand that. What does Rashi mean? An Osham Toloi is an Osham Toloi, even if the guy did not sin. I mean, that's the whole point of the Osham Toloi, was to punish the guy for criminal negligence. And criminal negligence does not necessarily mean the sin was actually committed. So it should not be chulin if it turns out the food was not treif. It should not be chulin because his risky behavior was the sin. You see from here that one's position as far as Ikvei Surah is concerned reflects or affects one's definition of Osham Toli. If you do require Ikvei Surah, then the Osham Toli is what they call a vart in criminal negligence. But if you say the Torah mandates an Osham Toli even when there is no Ikvei Surah, like Rameir, then the Osham Toli is not about criminal negligence, but about something else. What would that be? Here we see something remarkable in Krisus about Asham Toli in 6th parak. Here's a Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer Omer, Misnadev Adam Asham Toli b'chol yom b'chol shashi yirtza. V'hi nikres Asham Chasidim. A person can give an Asham Toli anytime he wants, even if he's not aware he did a sin. What? In fact, even if he's sure he didn't do one. Think about that. That's called Asham of Chasidim, the Asham of the pious, meaning the people who are really Chasidim, not nowadays Chasidim, the old school Chasidim, they would bring an Asham Toli, even if they for sure they didn't do a sin. Why? They even talk about Baba Mambuta, who is a famous Talmud of Shammai elsewhere. So he was really from. He would go to Beis Hamikdash and bring an Asham Toli every day of the year, except for the day after Yom Kippur. Because they said, he said, I swear by the Beis Hamikdash, if they wouldn't stop me, maybe I want to bring an Asham Toli. Wait till at least you have a chance to do a sin. So to use a modern example, as soon as Yom Kippur is over, and he said, the guy says, oh, I got to bring Asham Toli. And they said, wait a minute, we didn't do Marav yet. Give him a chance to do Asham Toli, right? Give it a day when you, at least conceivably, not guarantee you, a guy like this who's bringing 365 or 354 Asham Tolis here ain't sitting, But, okay, I hear that he held he was. But, give it a minute. The Chachamim themselves say, not Belezer, Hein Mavim Asham Toli, El Dabarshes Dona Kars Shigas Chatos. That Asham Toli is for a case of serious sin with Chayv Kars. So it turns out that there are a total of 3 opinions in this Mishnah regarding Asham Toli. One is you bring it only for a serious sin. That's a Chachamim. Dabarshes Dona Kars of Shigas Chatos. The second opinion is the opposite. It can be purely donative, even if you didn't sin, like Baba Mambuta right after Yom Kippur. Remember, he said, I want to do it. They won't let me. He wanted to do it. Wait a minute, they just have Hurachim after Ne'ilah. You didn't talk to anybody. You didn't have a chance to do an Aveiro. And he held you can do it. They just, wouldn't let him. And the third opinion is it can be donative. It can be brought, even if you didn't sin, to the best of your knowledge, as long as you may possibly have sinned. Those were the sages who rebuked Baba Mambuta. Because I'll tell you again, even after 24 hours after Yom Kippur, I guarantee you, this guy didn't do nothing wrong. He wasn't that type. These are radically different opinions, right? I mean, if you didn't sin, aren't you bringing an Asham Toli, like Relezer says, isn't that called maybe Chul Azara? But if it is a donative, notice if you can do it as an adova, then it's not maybe Chul Azara. So these are, you see the Tanoim already, when you ask the question, what is an Asham Toli? They had widely different views on this. Okay? It turns out the Rabbi Lezer, who is the one who says you don't need Ikva Isura, doesn't even need to sin at all. Misnadiv Adam b'chol eis b'chol shachir yotza, v'hu nikres Asham Chasidim. So that is why Rameir, who is more interesting, he says holds like Rabbi Lezer, you don't need Ikva Isura. That's what Rameir says. Hashochi Asham Toli b'chutz Rameir Machayev. The fact that it turns out that you didn't do the sin, so the meat you ate was not treif, does not make the Asham Toli offering invalid, because you can offer them whenever you want. If the Asham Toli is still valid, then indeed you sinned when you offered that Asham Toli outside of the Azar, outside of the courtyard. The problem is, Rameir, at the beginning of the 6th parak, in another Mishnah, says differently than Rebbe Lezer. The Mishnah says, maybe Asham Toli, but no L'shluchoto. So a guy brought an Asham Toli. In other words, I'm just making this up. There were 2 pieces in front of him. He ate one, and then he said one of those 2 was treif. He said, I better bring an Asham Toli. And then, on his way there, he enters the base of English. His wife calls him on the cell phone and says, actually, it turned out that both were kosher. I thought one was from the trade supermarket. Actually, that was a mistake. Both were kosher, so you didn't do any sin. So meanwhile, he already got the animal, he dedicated, he brought it to the base of English. What do you do? Iman shelo nishchat. So if this happened early on, like I just described, he walked in the base of English with the animal, but nothing happened yet. He ate the Rameir. So Rameir says, then send it back. It's not kachim anymore. It goes back to civilian status. But Chachamim omrim, Yirad sheyistayev, v'yimachar v'yipu double in a double. But the Chachamim say, not exactly that way. Let it be redeemed after a certain thing, and then use the money for another carbon. Rabbi Lezer megikrav, shimin abalzek chin acher. Rabbi Lezer, as we saw, says, what's the difference? If it doesn't come for this sin, it comes another sin. A person can offer an ocean tali any time. In Mishnishkat Nodalo, and if it turns out that they found out that both pieces were kosher, after the animal's already shechten, adam yishavit, you throw the blood away, and you also throw the meat away. So why does Rameir say that if you offer the Asham Toli outside, you're liable? After all, if you didn't sin, the carbon is invalidated, as we just saw Rameir said, and destroyed. Okay? Because he said, it goes back to civilian status. If now you bring a compensatory carbon, which may not be required if it turns out the meat was kosher, like I told you, you're now bringing Chulun Lazar, aren't you? There's a lot of rain on this, and Chaim Brisker has a famous Hakira, what's the Eshim Toli exactly, is it a Chiyavade al Shofar B'Savik Isser, which is how you ordinarily understand it, that when you get involved in a Suffolk situation, the Torah says you bring an Asham Toli, or didn't Suffolk outside of Suffolk Shofar, or is it only on the side that you did something wrong? How can I bring a carbon to the base of Mikdash when it may always be the case that I didn't do anything wrong? Maybe what I ate was not treif, because there were two pieces. Maybe it was not treif, and therefore aren't I bringing Chulun Lazar? Isn't that the definition? Xeris hakasa shemut afilu shtavi Chulun Lazar. Rabbi Chaim says, sort of like Deus ex machina, the Torah, by setting up such a carbon, it keeps that in mind. But I don't want to go on and on. My mother, if she was here, she would tell me I'm talking too long. So I will endeavor not to strain your patience. Let me just make my own observation as far as Asham Toloi. This is me. The wide variety of conflicting opinions on Asham Toloi indicate to me that historically there were two schools of thought long, long ago on how to understand this unique carbon. I would define them as Yira and Ava. If Asham Toli is important Yira, Yiras Hashem, then the Asham Toli is brought out of fear of divine wrath at your lax conduct. As we said before, that is the sword behind the Kvisura. I mean, you knew the strong possibility of sin, because one of the two pieces was treif, and you didn't care. Well, you better bring an offering to apologize for your criminally negligent attitude. It has nothing to do with the actual question whether they committed the physical sin of, say, eating the treif. Asham Toli, then, is not about the physical sin, it's about the moral sin. You had a bad, cavalier attitude. That's one way. The other school of thought is that the Asham Toli is an institution of Ava. Avas Hashem. Isn't that funny? A certain type of Ava. Like this. Since I love Hashem, I'm always worried I'm not being good enough. I'm not religious enough. This is a certain type of Yira, the Yira of Chasidim, of the truly pious. It's denominated by the Maseches Krisus in the 24th chapter of the book, which is the next to the last chapter of the Maseches Krisus, which means it's all the way at the top of the pyramid of Kedusha, of saintliness, and it's called yahrtzeit, right? Yahrtzeit, which is interesting. Listen to this. Again, the Maseches Krisus says in chapter Perek Dalet. Now, there's all kind of yira. There's Yiras HaOnesh. A guy is scared the guy will punish him. Knows the reason I'm not stealing or committing znus, says, I don't want to burn in hell. Okay, that works too. That's called yiras onish. You don't want to be punished. But that's like a lower form of yira. That's what they always say. A higher one is yiras haromamus. You see, the Ribono Shel Olam, B'chvod V'atzma, who runs the whole world, the universe, I'm a tiny nothing, and he wants me to this and this. How can I go against that? You know, he's so majestic and so forth. So it's awe, not fear. It's awe, A-W-E. But then there's like a third one, and that's called yiras hachet. I want to read you a short paragraph in the Maseches Krisus. Zos ha'yira she'anachnu me'yira ata. This kind of yira that we're talking about, yiras hachet, hu k'mo chelik miyiras haromas she'zacharnu. It's like a part of yiras haromas, of the awe. But it's really its own category. Hainu, kine inyona. What it means is she adam yare v'doeg tamid al ma'asav. A person should go around 24/7, always worrying about his conduct. Always worrying about his conduct. Pen nisarna bam eze shemetz tamei, or pen ye eze bam eze davar katan gadol she'ein lefi gadol kvodo yisbarach v'rom b'shmo. A person should always walk around saying, my avodas Hashem is not up to what it should be, and I'm lacking in some ways. Maybe it has a certain shemetz chet in it. Maybe I did this to show off or something like that, you know. Or maybe my avodas Hashem contains something davar gadol or katan, which is not lefi gadol kvodo yisbarach v'rom b'shmo. My davening was not a good enough davening. You know what I'm saying? You know, my learning was not a good enough learning. It's a quality thing of how you run the mitzvahs. And a person who has this quality of yiras hachet is afraid of the sin. He's not afraid of the consequences of the sin. He's well beyond that. He's afraid I'm not doing what I should do, what God's covenant, requires, and it bothers me. Okay. In both cases, yiras haromas and yiras hachet, they're very similar in one degree, but the difference is, and this is just interesting, is this typical Maseches Krisus, ki yiras haromas hu b'shas ha'maisa b'shas avoda perek avera. The yiras haromas is when you're actually doing avodas Hashem. You're doing a mitzvah, let's say, for example, and you're worried, am I getting the right kind of tzitzis, the right kind of tefillin? Is my Shabbos table the right kind of Shabbos table? Even though you're doing all the right things, you got your table, you got your wine, you got your chal, all right, but is it the right way? Like that. He's always trembling that maybe the quality of my mitzvahs are not up to par. Right? The concept of yiras hachet is not when I'm doing a mitzvah. The opposite. It's when I'm walking around during the day. And I'm always afraid lest I come to do a chet. So I'm just making some off the top of my head. I'm going to pick up a carpool. What happens if I park next to this and this guy and when they're talking to Lashon Hara? That's a high madrega to think like that. You understand? You're worried while you're driving to school for the carpool that something bad shouldn't come out of it. You're afraid of the chet, not afraid of the punishment. You're afraid of the chet, right? Kikor yer mina chet. Shlo yikonis v'yisar b'maisa machmas p'shia b'yisraslos or machmas helam. There shouldn't be something bad that happens in your conduct, either because you're lazy or you forgot about it or things like that, and so on and so forth. You can look it up yourself if you're interested. Now, that's a different kind of Asham Tali, okay? Whereas the school of Yira sees the Asham Tali as a function of Yiras Ha'onish, and therefore is preoccupied with questions of physical culpability for discrete specific acts, is preoccupied with questions of Ikvi Surah, meaning criminal negligence. The other school of thought, the Maseches Yesharim school of thought, the Baba Ben Buta school of thought, looks to the Asham Tali as an instrument of constructive and beneficial self-criticism, a spur to ceaseless and ever greater efforts to attain greater dveikus. That's why Baba Ben Buta always want to offered right after Yom Kippur. He wasn't a nut, he was a saint. The purpose of the Asham Tali is to refine, according to this way of thinking, to refine the sensibility, to cultivate a sense of guilt in a constructive way, to purify oneself. Hence, it's a donative. Obviously, if you got a bad attitude, then it's exculpatory. But the point of saintliness is to destroy any cavalierness. A Baba Mabuta, I can assure you, is not going to eat any chaticha unless he's doggone sure that there's no possibility of treif. So in other words, the Asham Tali, according to this way of thinking, is a chepza of yahrtzeit. Excuse me. Down with a cold. My mother, whose 15th yahrtzeit was yesterday, was not a saint. She wasn't above Bambuta, but she did possess a natural sense of yashrus, if there's anybody out there that knew her. Meaning, if anything was wrong or not right, not completely honest, she naturally recoiled. It's not that she was a tzedekis, but she had a very strong moral inner compass and a strength of character and faith, without which she would not have survived the Holocaust. At the same time, she was a normal person with a strong gift for friendship. People liked her because of these traits, and indeed her biggest breaks in life, because my mother was born in 1912 to extreme poverty in Slovakia, and her father died when she was 5, so she had a very hard beginning. Her biggest breaks in life came from friends, Jewish friends and non-Jewish friends. During the war, it was the Goyim, Catholic and Protestant friends, who risked their lives for her, otherwise I wouldn't be here. In America, she had friends in Baltimore, like Rabbi Hertzbergs and Newbergers, and of the old Baltimore, that helped her marry a second time and raise a family in her middle years. The main thing, of course, is that people should try to act in according to these ways. With that, I close this down. I wish everybody a good Shabbos, and Amen.